will be sharing session. So make sure to keep an eye out for it and submit it before each session ends. Okay. So before we get started, I would like to give you a little background about Algoarena. So this is an inter-university coding competition organized by the Leo Club of University of Srijawardhanapura in collaboration with IEEE Computer Society. So it includes 2 rounds, an online preliminary round and a physical final round, along with a series of workshops like this one to help you build your skills. So without further ado, now let's move on to the main part of today's session. Yes, we are truly honored to have with us Mr. Kushan Bharati, the co-founder of InfoWaves and Articum, and a visiting lecturer at IIT. He'll be sharing his insights on UI UX and mobile app design best practices. Actually, it's a topic that's incredibly relevant for all of us in tech and design, right? So yeah, so without any further delay, let's warmly welcome Mr. Kushan. So, sir, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So, yeah, let me turn on my video as well. Right. So, really nice to see so many participants in the session today, and thank you very much for inviting me. So let me share my screen so that we can get started. Right, my screen is visible now, right? Okay, so the topic that has been given to me today is UI UX best practices. So UI UX is a very important area when it comes to programming and developing applications in general, and that's basically what makes the users interact and define the success of a product that's there, right? So yeah, so let's start off with what is UI UX, right? So UIs essentially mean the user interfaces that are there, and essentially that's going to be what you see, right? Like the buttons, images, text that is there, the colors of an application. So whether it's a mobile application or a desktop application, user interfaces is what the user will see and interact with, right? And the user experience is one of the most important aspects of this. So essentially, it's all about how users feel when using a particular software. So areas that are important are, is it easy to use, right? So for example, if you download an application from the Google Play Store, Apple App Store, when you start using it, is it easy to use? Are there any confusing points there? So for example, to do some kind of interaction, if you need to, if you need like a user guide to understand what to do, there can be issues, right? So having a confusing UI is going to be a little bit of a problem. So when it comes to working with UIs, sometimes is it fun to operate, right? And you have to make sure that it's not frustrating for users to use an application, right? So let's take a small example. If you take a microwave, so like not in terms of software, but if you take a microwave, generally you see buttons, the screen, and yeah, that's essentially the UI. That's essentially like what you would get in a UI. And the next part is it easy to cook something without reading the user manual, right? So that's the user experience, right? So making sure that users can easily use the application without having too much trouble is the user experience that's there. Right. So when it comes to UI UX, there is a design process that needs to be followed. So first of all, I'll go through the design process, and after that, we'll talk about the different best practices that are there and what to do and what not to do. Right. So the first thing that you do is you come up with the functional requirements. Right. So when you're working for a competition as well, it's important to identify the functional requirements of the application that you're going to be building. Okay. After that, optionally, you can do this thing called making user stories. Right. So I'll go a little bit in depth into that in a bit. After that, personally, like when I start designing something, I always do first is draw some wireframes, right? And after that, once the wireframes are completed, you go to the UI UX design. And finally, you can prototype the UIs using a tool like Figma, and you can give it in a way that is that can be interacted by users as well. Right. So talking about the first step, identifying the functional requirements. Right. So that's going to be the first step that's going to be done. And when you come up with the functional requirements, one of the best practices is to prioritize the features that are there. Right. So there's this method called the Moscow method to set this priority. Right. So Moscow as in not Russia, but just acronym to make it easy to understand. Right. So M stands for must have features. S is should have features. So right. So the must have features, you will definitely give a very high priority. Those are the most important features. Right. The should have features are going to be which are very important, but having a little bit less priority than the must have features. And you can have could have features. So these are going to be the fancy features that might be there. And these can be a little bit optional, right? It might be for another phase. So essentially, the could have features are like that, and there might be things that you're not going to be developing at all. So even in the design process, you will be avoiding the will not have features, right? So, but the must have features, the should have features, and optionally even the could have features, you can actually design with according to the prioritization. Right. So a small example of how you can write the functional requirements. Users must be able to place an order. The users should be able to track an order. The users could be able to schedule an order. So that's given as a somewhat optional feature. And users will not be able to integrate the app with smart kitchen appliances. Okay, so that's something that's definitely not going to be done, right? But all the other three functional requirements that have been identified, you can design and come up with the features for. Right. Then the next step is coming up with the user stories. Right. So these are essentially short descriptions to understand how the user is going to interact with the system. Right. So with this, you can help you can help to understand how the user will interact, and essentially like when you're working with a team, the entire team needs to understand the expected flow, right? So with this, you can get the teams to understand as well. And when it comes to the design and development as well, you can have a proper understanding of how a flow should be created, right? So, and most importantly, this improves the communication between stakeholders and developers, and especially between the design team and whoever will be doing the requirement gathering as well, right? So there's a small structure for handling user stories, right? So you write it as a type of user, I want to do some kind of action, so that I get some kind of benefit, right? So this is the basic structure of how the user stories are going to be created. And you will be coming up with the user stories based on that, right? So ideally for each functional requirement, you'd want to come up with multiple user stories to tell the exact flow of how things will be going. So I'll give a few examples here. So now I use this pizza app example, right? So for a pizza app, as a returning user, I want to log into the application, right? So that's essentially talking about the user stories about the login process, right? So I want to log into the app so that I can access my saved preferences and order history, right? So that tells once the user logs into the app, what kind of benefit the user will get. Okay. As a user, I want to search for a branch by address so that I can select the most convenient location for my order, right? So for example, if you're in Colombo and if you go to order pizza, there's no point in ordering it from Kurunag, right? So this step clearly tells that the location needs to be selected for the order so that it will come to the right address. Right. So, optionally, when it comes to pizza apps, you'd want to access the app as a well, right? Are the menu options available? What are the prices that are there? You'd want to have a guest account, right? So over here, we are identifying the type of user as well, right? So as a guest user, I want to access the menu and see what's available, right? So as a user, I want to view the menu so that I can see the available prices. So that I can see the available pizzas, like sides and drinks to make a selection, right? So these are some of the things that are there, right? So yeah, so once your user flows are identified, something you can do is create the wireframes, right? So wireframes are essentially like a basic sketch of how your UIs are going to be. So like your UI design process starts here, right? So the previous to the functional requirements and the user stories were both somewhat along the lines of requirement gathering, right? So with wireframes, you start the initial design. So it's essentially before building an app, you do like a rough sketch, right? So think of it like a blueprint for a house, right? So the architect starts with the blueprint, and after that, uh, the next design process starts. Okay, so you can also consider it like a pencil sketch before painting, right? So personally now, when it comes to design, something I always do first is I draw like a very basic sketch on a whiteboard, right? So I have this whiteboard which I use for starting up my designs. So once the functional requirements are identified and after I get hold of after I do some of the user stories, I draw on the whiteboard like a very basic sketch, right? So the sketches I would draw are somewhat like this first UI that's there, right? So with that, I can identify the very basic layout of how I want my application to be, and I can identify the screens as well, the different screens that are there. So like it might be for mobile, it might be for a desktop UI. So uh, whichever requirement is there, I just start by drawing on a whiteboard, or even using paper is fine, right? So working with paper is also good. Like it's a good place to start. And before you do the actual thing in the UIs, so it's very rough sketches, right? So you can go through multiple iterations to identify how exactly you want everything to look. Because once you do like the proper design, making changes can be a little bit difficult. Right? So once you identify all these layouts, it makes things easy. So with the wireframes, the main target is going to be what will go where. So if you want button placements, where are the button placements going to go? Where are the images going to go? And text boxes and things like that. Essentially, just the layout, right? You're not going to have too much detail in it, just the layout. Right? So there are different types of wireframes as well, right? So depending on up to what level you want your wireframes, you can, for starters, do it on paper or a whiteboard, and then you get low fidelity wireframes. Low fidelity wireframes, essentially, you can use tools if you want. So some of the tools you can use are Figma, Canva, then Draw.io. Or like if you want to go crazy, you can use even Paint, right? And then you have mid fidelity wireframes, right? So the three screens that you see over here are the low fidelity wireframe, the mid fidelity wireframe, and the high fidelity wireframe, right? So as you can see, the low fidelity wireframe, it's just a bunch of sketches randomly there. So ideally, when you do this, you'd want to put some labels and name it so that you know exactly what's there, right? The mid fidelity wireframe is also something like that, but you can see it's like properly designed, right? You have a standard set of icons that you can use, and with that, you can set it up, right? And of course, the high fidelity wireframe, you can. I got a message saying the screen is not shared. Can someone confirm whether you can see the screen? Because on my side, it shows that the screen is shared. Okay, screen is visible. Okay. Right. So when it comes to the high fidelity wireframes, as I was saying, uh, you can put the text as well. You can tell exactly what's going to go on the buttons. Right. So it essentially works like that. Okay, and you can come up with the proper design. You don't need to go with the colors and proper images here, just essentially the text, so that you know exactly how your application layout is going to come out as. It's going to be somewhat close to your final design. But for buttons and all, you're not going with the actual design. It's just the placements, but you will have the actual words explaining what they are. Right. So after you complete the wireframes, comes the UI UX design part. Right. So UI UX design. Now this is where you use a tool like Figma and come up with the actual designs that you will be working with. Right. So the reasons you need it are you can validate exactly how you want the app. Right. So it needs to be visually appealing, and you can provide a smooth and satisfying experience for users, and like all of this with the design you can finalize before you start developing, right? Because when it comes to development, the development process is going to be much more difficult, right? Once you develop something, making changes to those UIs, making changes to themes, it's going to be somewhat difficult if there are like major changes that are going to be there, right? So that's why we do the UI UX design and finalize things before we get to the actual development, right? So yeah, that's essentially why you need UI UX design. And so the most recommended tool I can use is Figma, right? So Figma is free mostly. University accounts usually get the pro features, as I know. So I'm not 100% sure about that, but like you can check with your university accounts and see if you get the pro features as well, right? So best part about Figma, it works on your browser. So I always use the browser version. I haven't downloaded the Figma app. Drag and drop options are available. And the easiest thing is it's the best part is it's very easy to learn. So when I used Figma first, I was on a deadline. That was the first time I touched Figma. Did a bunch of wireframes. The client approved it, and it was good to go. Like within like 2 hours, I was able to learn Figma very easily and present it to the client as well. Right. And the most important part about Figma is you can collaborate. Right. So it wasn't just me. I was working with a team, and we like this was like a very long time ago. And yeah, we were able to collaborate and like quickly come up with the designs. And like yeah, 2 or 3 of us were working on it at the same time, and we got it done. Right. So yeah, when it comes to the UI UX, you can okay, wait, I need right. So when it comes to the UI UX, you are going to come up with the actual design for the application, right? Essentially what you want as the outlook. So I'll just give you a little bit of an example from a project that we did recently. So my company InfoWebs, we worked on this project called Dialogue AI. You might have seen and used it. So essentially how the process started was we were given the UIs by Dialogue, and there were some iterations that were done, and all the designs that were done were finalized. Right. So it was only after that that the development began. Right. And because of the UIs, the developers had a perfect idea of exactly how everything had to look. And with that, it was a very easy process to complete the development. Right. So that's the main point of doing this UI UX. Right. You identify exactly how you want your user interfaces to look like. Right. And in terms of the UX, you can prototype using Figma. Right. So prototyping is essentially all the interactions that are there. You can set it up and it will look like a real application. Right. You can like if you go very far into prototyping, you can actually make it work exactly like a real application. Right. So for example, now I'll take so a team that I was mentoring at one point, they went really far in terms of UI UX. Up to date, that's the best user interface I've seen. Right. So in terms of the design, that was a very simple design, but they went crazy with the prototyping. Right. It was for a game that they did the UI UX, and like if you didn't know that it was Figma, you'd think that it was actually a game because all the interactions were working perfectly. Everything was smoothly done, and you could interact perfectly with all the elements that were there in the UI. Right. So that's how far you can take the prototyping part in Figma. Of course, there are limitations like typing and all. Right. So that kind of things are there, but ideally, like you can make it like an actual application. And with Figma, the best part is you have the counterpart application for mobile as well. So let's say you design your UI for an iPhone. If you have an iPhone, you can run your applications on your iPhone itself, and you can interact and show what's there. And specifically when you're doing UI UX, a best practice is always run it on your phone and see whether the font sizes and things like that match what would be good. Because sometimes when you're designing on large screens, something that can happen is you won't realize that the font sizes are too small because you see a large font size. But if you look at it in a smaller screen, the fonts are not going to be visible. Right. So it's always a good practice to put it onto a phone and just interact and see whether the font sizes are all okay. Right, so doesn't need to be an iPhone. So Figma gives iPhones by default, but like if you're on an Android, most of the Android phones are also available and custom sizes are there. So you can build your design for that custom size, and you can design it and test it out. Right. So a few ways that you can prototype. So paper-based prototypes are an option, but not the best. Obviously, you can interact with something like that. Best practice is to use a tool like Figma. So either using mid fidelity or high fidelity prototypes, you can work. So high fidelity would be the outlook of a perfect application, right? So in addition to this, there are extensions that you can use. So using tools like Adobe After Effects, you can give some fancy functionalities as well, right? So I don't have a video of that, but like there was this animation that I saw for UI UX, which was based on like when the toggle switch is it was for a toggle switch. When the toggle is click for dark mode and light mode, it changes into a moon and a sun based on where it is, right? So for advanced animations like that, you can connect with After Effects and work, right? And another way of prototyping, not something I would recommend, but you can do code-based prototyping as well. So if you want, you can do your first version through HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and do. But of course, Figma has a lot of functionalities, and you can design your application in a perfect way, in exactly how you'd want your users to use it, right? And the best part about prototyping is once you complete the design, you can actually let users interact with it and see, right? So for a formation, it's actually a process that you can do, right? So with that, you can validate and see whether the UI UX that you have come up with is actually aligning with how customers would, or rather users would interact with your system, right? So based on your requirement, you can decide how much prototyping you will do, right? For example, if it's for a competition that is going to be testing UI UX, I'd say go all the way and add as much prototyping and as much interactions as possible so that you can demonstrate your UI UX perfectly, right? But if your designs are going to be more developer centric, and if your designs are going to be for moving on to the next step, which is development, then you don't need to go all the way in terms of prototyping. But according to the requirement, you can decide how much of your application you're going to prototype, right? So the image over here, I think you all must have seen the animation. Yeah, so essentially, like when you click on items, it will move around, and that's essentially how it will look, right? So based on your requirement, you can decide how much you're going to prototype. Okay, so why good design matters, right? So a well-designed app or website is going to make users feel happy for starters, right? If you use an application or website and if you're going to get angry or frustrated while using it, that means the user experience there is not good. And to make sure that users are going to continue using your platform, your users need to be happy, right? So that's one of the reasons having a good user experience is important, right? And a good user experience would help with the navigation as well. Clear navigation paths where users will know where to go and how exactly to get something done, right? And in addition to that, usable to save time as well. right? And the one of the most important thing is, depending on your target audience, you should ideally make it accessible to anyone who uses your application, even if they have some kind of disability. You should be able to access them. Okay, so some of the disabilities that are there, like color blindness, certain visual impairments. For things like that, you can check the accessibility guidelines, and with the accessibility guidelines, you can set it up. So, like following proper UI UX standards and designing a UI will help you to get to a good design, right? So ideally, a better design means you're going to get more users. That means more users means better business, and that means a better success rate, right? So especially if you're working on an application that would be coming out as a product and as a startup, you'd want to get as much customers as possible, right? So following proper UI UX standards and coming up with a good design would help you get there. Right. So I have some real life examples for good UIs and bad UIs here. So an example for a great user experience is Amazon. So it's very easy to find things on Amazon, right? And when it comes to bad UX, some school portals might be there where it might be hard to find certain things. The speed might be too slow, right? So I have two images also over here. Amazon is there. The site looks very clean, smooth, and at the bottom there's this screen. uh it's basically a blank screen with like a uh bunch of text that's there, random text that's there. And yeah, in general it looks old, and trust me, that application was annoying to use, right? It was crashing all the time. So even crashing is considered bad UX, right? So all crashes should be handled. And yeah, so those are some of the things to avoid that are there. Right. So furthermore, I'll show you some examples for some good UIs and bad UIs. Right. So for this, let's do a small activity kind of thing. So you can use the chat actually. So we'll take around 2 minutes. I will show you a UI that's bad, right? And what I want you to do is just think of what annoys you when you see this UI. And yeah, can you all see this website now? So on the chat, just put what you think is bad about this UI. So for starters, there's like multiple colors that are there. It's distracting. So let's have a few messages that you think are problems in the UIs in this UI. So I'll just scroll around and see, show you all as well. Right. So it scrolls like this. Random items that are there. So meanwhile, if you all have any questions, you can add those as well, right? Right. So I've got quite a few responses as direct messages. So maybe you can put on the main chat so that everyone can see as well. So some of the responses are background colors for text, right? So I'm assuming that's for the highlights. So it gives a little bit of old effect, right? So too much colors. That's a very important point. There's like a lot of colors that have been used in this website, right? Gradients that are there, multiple gradients. Like over here, the text is small, right? So a lot of information going around, right? There's alignment issues. So that's another thing that has been identified by you all. The different colors that are there, the background image that's there. Okay, that's also a good observation. There's this random background image. Quality also seems okay. Background image, it's like repeating over and over again, right? So that's another issue. Good identification, good spotting there. Highlighted text, and I think there's a question, so I'll come back to questions in a bit. Too much colors, very different font sizes. Good observation there. So over here we have one size, over here an even smaller size, larger text here, old looking links on highlight. So something I'd put is the calendar is randomly there, right? And in a random background. Okay, so text highlights, that's there. Is this supposed to be text? I have no idea what that random black box is. Yeah. In general, not well organized as well. Now that's another response that you all have given, right? So pretty good observations there, right? And of course, these links that are there, right? Styling hasn't been done; it's randomly there, right? So pretty good observations from you all, and of course, the footer is also broken. I'm assuming it's broken. So those are some of the observations of bad UI, right? So I'll show you all some good UIs that are there, right? So I got the Duolingo site here, right? So this one is an example for good UX, UI UX, right? So it's very simple. So most modern UIs are generally very simple, right? And another very important part is now when you scroll, you can see that certain sections get highlighted in the page, right? So when you're designing for desktops, this is a very important point that's there, right? So having this breakdown as pages lets you highlight the important points in a very specific way, right? So the highlight becomes better, and in terms of conveying the message, it becomes much better, right? So over here, it's promoting the application and it goes full screen, right? Once it's scrolled, now it's promoting the free trial that's there, right? Then further information is there. Again, it fits in the page, right? Different information, it all fits in the page. And finally, at the bottom, it says get started. And this also, again, has like a specific section. And even the footer, it takes up the entire page, but it fits very well, right? So this is an example for a very good user experience. So when it comes to mobile design as well, something that can be done is like you need to make it very responsive and allow users to like these page breaks and things like that. You can follow these standards for mobile UX. There are certain guidelines, so we'll dive further into that in a bit. Right. So meanwhile, if you all have any questions, feel free to put them on the chat, right? So ideally, like if you all can put it as public messages, like instead of sending direct messages, I think we can avoid repeating some of the questions, but feel free to put the questions whichever way you feel, right? Okay, so when it comes to UI UX best practices, right? When it comes to modern designs, the best way to go is having a very clean and simple UI, right? So consistency is key, right? Having the same fonts, buttons that are there. So like instead of give me a second. Right. So instead of having like different design elements for buttons, you can have consistent buttons. And one of the most important things is having a color theme that is consistent throughout the application. Right. So this goes together with branding as well. So branding is another aspect. And when it comes to good UIs, you need to follow branding. Right. So for example, that Duolingo website I showed you, Duolingo revolves around that light green color, right? So like all the elements, it screams that color, and the moment you see it, you remember that owl, right? Uh, so like your UI design needs to revolve around the branding that you're coming up with, right? So for that, you can come up with a color palette. So there are color palette generators that are there. You can use those and come up with the palette and work with those colors. So try to have a minimal number of colors as well when it comes to the palette. Now, most of you all told there were too many colors that are there in that website that I showed you, right? So doesn't mean that you need to stick to one color. You can have like 2 or 3 colors that you work with. But if you need to use any other colors, uh, depending on your requirement, you can be a little bit flexible, right? Uh, One of the most important things is again another problem that you all highlighted there, having proper alignments, right? Make sure things line up properly and are not in random places. And when you're placing items now in the wireframing phase itself, you can identify what goes where, right? So with this, come up with a proper plan on how you identify your layouts, right? So for example, now not in terms of UX, but supermarkets follow this strategy. So I'll take an example that was there, right? So a certain supermarket used to place beer next to uh, diapers for babies, right? So the reason was when dads go shopping, uh, when they go and buy diapers, they'd want to take a beer so that they can relax, right? So that was targeting uh, targeting a certain sale, right? So similar to that, placing things also can work, like catering to psychological effects. You can place certain things in certain ways, right? So come up with a plan as to why a certain card goes in a certain place, right? Another good practice is leaving spaces, right? So there are some applications that are there which are like all cluttered up. So even uh, even uh, even the ALA website, you can see, these like all cluttered, right? Over here, there's barely any space, and it looks all cluttered, right? So it's a very good practice to leave spaces in between. That's why now when it comes to this UI example that's there in my slide deck, you can see there's plenty of space given. Even between the cards, you can see there's a space, and that that makes the UI not cluttered, right? So cluttered UIs can be annoying to use. Now, for example, the Yahoo website used to have like a lot of information on the website. It was very simple to use. Only the search engine, the search bar was there, and a few buttons, and it was much easier to use as a search engine. So, like, depending on your requirement, you can identify what kind of items are there, and spacing also can be done based on that, right? Another very important aspect is use proper contrasting text, right? So there can be instances where you have a certain background color and your text is too light. So that Duolingo site, the colors are probably failing the uh, contrast test, but what they have done is actually pretty good there, right? So make sure your text is visible. So I'll show you a tool where you can come up with proper contrast when it comes to color selections, right? And as of the 2020s, another very important aspect is coming up with mobile first uh, designs, because it is in on a website, on a desktop. If it doesn't look good in mobile, it's going to be a major problem, because most people will be accessing through mobile, right? So a mobile first approach, an application, right? Yeah, if we take the UI that's on the screen over here, you can see this for a expense tracking app, I believe. So like all the sections are categorized properly, right? First you have the saving goals, then you have the expenses that are there, and then you have the different transactions as well. So separate sections are there. Spacing has been left between these, and it follows a theme. So it's going with the blue color, right? So there are some slight deviations to the colors, but you can see it's a very light theme and it follows that blue color consistently. Consistent fonts are there, right? All the buttons look the same. And, yeah, when you look at it, it's very easy to, right? That's an example for a good UI. So here's another dashboard that's there. So this also has certain card elements. So you can see most of the card elements look the same. This has a lot of information, but you can see it's not all crammed together. Right? It's not all crammed together. It's easy to use. And yeah. Okay, just give me 1 second. Okay. Right. So yeah, even the sections in this have been divided in a easy to understand way. And yeah, the color theme, now it's following a purple color theme, and you can see that consistently. And even the fonts, it's using these sans serif type fonts, which is a very good practice when it comes to doing UI UX designs, right? So to make it easy for everyone, some of the things that you can do are make the features accessible for all the users, right? So there's this thing called alt text for people with visual impairments. You can set it up in such a way that that the information can be read by text to speech readers, right? Use high contrast text. right? So the images given here are for high contrast text. So this from a contrast checker, which I will show in a bit. And use fonts that are readable, right? So like I said before, if you have small fonts and they can't be seen on the screen, that's going to be a major problem, right? And in certain instances, for desktop applications, mainly, you need to identify if people can use it without a mouse, right? So sometimes you might need to focus on keyboard interactions and things like that. So yeah, contrast of the application. Let me think my connection dropped for a bit. Right. So when it comes to the contrast, I'll show you a contrast checker that's available. So let me just share that screen. Uh, can you just confirm whether you can see my screen? I think my connection has a small issue. Let me get that fixed. Give me 1 second. Okay, I think it's fine now. Right. So the easiest way to get the contrast check is do a small Google search for contrast check. Right. So you get multiple solutions. So like this first example is the first search result is something I used to use quite often. The second one is pretty good. It has a nice UI as well. Right. So the first one that was there, the UI is a little bit old and looks a little bit off. Right. So over here now with this contrast checker, you can identify whether your colors are going to look good. Right. So I'll change the colors over here. Now let's say now with this blue, I'll have like a very light color. Right. See now text is barely visible. Right. So now the contrast checker gives a score based on this and it tells very poor. And for both small text and large text, this gives a score which you can use to identify whether your colors are going to look good. So when you're coming up with the color selections for the color palette, you can use the contrast checker like this and get it done, right? So if we have like a black, then it's the contrast is very good and you can see. And let's say we have a dark background, again you can see it fails, right? So having colors in like this yellow area, it's generally good. So you can You can see it up to somewhat extent, but it's not the best, right? But when it comes to large text, it's fine. Small text, it's somewhat okay. In general consideration, it looks okay. So let's try something like that Duolingo screen that was there, right? So that had a green like this, right? So you can see now, even though the Duolingo site looks good, it's an example where the test can actually fail a bit, but the site looks generally okay. So the contrast checker can be used as somewhat of a guideline, but like you sometimes have to use your gut feelings when it comes to these designs, right? So ideally, if you can get colors that fit properly and follow these contrast guidelines and all of that, that would be the best case scenario, right? Okay, let's get back to the slide deck, right? So basically like that, you can come up with the color palette and have proper fonts that are there. And when it comes to fonts also, it's a good practice to use the sans serif fonts, right? So like the fonts that I have used in my slide deck, um, specifically like fonts that are given by Google. Now, those are fonts that are made for web, right? So using fonts like Roboto or Poppins would be a good practice in modern designs. But like sometimes, depending on your branding and requirements, you might have to work with other fonts as well. So it always depends on the scenario, right? So you can do your research and come up with all of these, right? So another thing that's there is when it comes to colors selections, you can actually identify different meanings for colors, right? So I don't really have a slide for that, but generally like colors like blues and greens are used for giving a somewhat calming feeling. So like if it's an application that you're using for like calming people down, you can use colors like blues and greens. Generally reds or oranges, they are for more action-packed things to get people excited. So yeah, depending on what kind of application you're building, you can select your colors based on that research as well. So like using colors have psychological effects, right? So there's research on this. So you by simply doing a Google search, you should be able to find meanings for or other reasoning for colors and the psychological impacts that are there for colors. So with that, you can select your color palette in a way that it hits your audience as required, right? Yeah. So this was in terms of the UIs. In terms of the user experience, when you're coming up with the best practices, ask yourself a few questions, right? Does your application load quick? Right? So if you have to wait for like a very long time for the application to load or something like that, that's going to cause multiple issues. Like there's this according to certain research, they have found how long a user is willing to wait. So like let's take another question, set of questions again, right? How long are you willing to wait for a website to load, right? Is it like 5 seconds or 1 minute or a few minutes? Depending on what you feel is comfortable for you, let's have a set of messages on the chat. How long are you willing to wait for a website to load? Okay, I got one answer, 1 millisecond. 10 seconds or less than 10 seconds. Less time as possible. Any other answers? So back in the 2010s, when 3G and ADSL connections were more popular, even a simple website loading used to take like a very long time, right? So back then, the expectation for speed was quite low. But now I've got an answer saying usually 2 to 3 seconds. According to the research as well, it's somewhere around 3.2 seconds or something like that, which is the average time that a person is willing to wait for a website to load, right? So that means as part of the user experience, you need to come up with solutions that load at that speed, right? So another depends on the mood. Usually 2 to 6 seconds. Yeah, that's also aligning with the research findings that have been there. Right. So now I'll give you an example in terms of UI UX. Right. So a company had an application like enterprise application. The customer was very unhappy because the loading time was quite intense. Right. Like it wasn't up to like 10 seconds. It was taking too long. Right. So the company decided to do a full analysis on how much it would cost to make the speeds fast, right? So that evaluation gave like $1 million fix that had to be done. Like infrastructure had to be changed, and a lot of optimizations had to be done with the software, and so many improvements had to be done to be able to increase the speed, right? At the end of the day, they didn't have to spend much because they came up with a very simple solution in terms of UI UX, right? Any guesses what that was? To solve the speed issue. The main problem was users were getting annoyed when they were waiting, right? So when this slide came up, you all might have seen a certain animation that was going. So let's see if I can get that back on. So you can see this loading animation, right? So what was implemented was a simple loading animation. And that gave some kind of indication that the page is actually loading, that it was not stuck, right? So this essentially is a type of feedback for what's happening, right? Even if it's taking time to load, it was showing a percentage of how much it was loaded. So at the end of the day, it might not be an actual percentage, right? It might be just a fabricated number that is displayed, but that kept the user satisfied, right? So that reduced complaints a lot just by having that simple animation. So those are like some of the tips and tricks that you can use for making the user experience better, right? So if you can't give a optimization in terms of development, give a simple solution which should keep your users satisfied, right? At the end of the day, the users being happy is what's important, right? Other best UX practices are, if you make some kind of mistake, being able to correct it. Okay, so sometimes correcting might not be an option, but if it's an area where you can allow a user to correct a mistake that's there, that would be one of the best practices, right? Is it easy to use on both phones and computers, right? Responsive design is very important, and especially in terms of uh, mobile application development, responsiveness is very important with the different sizes that are available now, right? So if you take iPhones, there's like three, I think. When you take, there's going to be way more sizes, right? So it depends on the phone producers, depends on the different sizes that are available, depends on the models, right? So there are like different sizes and different resolutions, right? So your applications or websites should ideally be visible in all of these devices, right? Otherwise, certain people might not be able to use it, especially in terms of these small devices that are there. Right. So nowadays you don't really get much small devices, but like while the service is running out, there are people who use small devices as well. Right. So it's always a good practice to cater to those as well. Okay. So to summarize things, good UI UX essentially is easy to use, right? And you can get things done fast, and most importantly, you're not going to be getting stressed over doing certain things, right? Bad UX has confusing buttons, no feedback, and there will be too many steps, right? So I'll take another example for bad user experience. Now, there was this game that I played, right? So there was this online multiplayer mode that was available. So like that's something I figured out recently. Like I played the game a while back, I could never use that feature, right? When I click the button, it just says loading the screen, right? The loading thing like keeps going on and on so many minutes, and it doesn't really do anything, right? So I killed the application and restarted, nothing worked. Okay, so turns out I was supposed to equip some things to enable that mode, right? So there was no indication whatsoever that said that. Okay, I was frustrated. I stopped playing the game when I initially played it as well, and I randomly just equipped these items, and after that I was able to play that. But it was very confusing, right? I had no idea why it was not working, and I almost uninstalled the app because that mode was not working as well. So those are places where you need to have cater properly in terms of user experience with proper feedback, right? So feedback essentially means giving a response to whatever you do, right? If you press a button, show an indication of what's happening. You can play a success message, or if it fails, you can show some kind of error message, right? So you can do certain things like that. Make sure that your users are satisfied, right? So yeah, to continue, just give me 1 minute. I will be back. Yeah, sorry about that interruption. I had to check why my dog was crying. Right. So to continue with what we were discussing, right. So when it comes to user experience, mobile versus desktop, there are different types of interactions that are there, right? So when it comes to mobile devices, it's going to be a touch screen 99% of the time, right? So your UIs should cater to touch screens, right? As for desktops, it will probably be mouse interactions or touchpad or something like that, right? Screen sizes are different, so the layouts also need to change, right? This is where responsive design comes in. And when it comes to responsive design, always go mobile first, right? Design for mobile, and with that, work towards the desktops, because that way it's easier to come up with the designs rather than moving desktop to mobile, right? So the navigation patterns can be different, right? So you can have bottom navigations in mobile phones, because when you're holding a phone, Uh, give me a second. Let me get my phone. Right. So when you're holding a phone, ideally you will be pressing the buttons from the bottom. Right. It's more difficult to reach the top areas. You will have to hold the phone like this. Right. So when you're coming up with your layouts, you need to identify those issues as well. Right. As for desktops, it's not going to be a problem. You can place things anywhere that you want. Right. And when it comes to load times and performance expectations as well, so you can use tricks like what I mentioned with the loading screens, and give him proper feedback so that the user knows exactly what's happening. Right. So yeah. Now, when it comes to mobile specific things, uh, there are certain guidelines that you need to follow in terms of best practices. Right. Navigation and layout. Navigation and setting up the layout, you need to consider some of these things. So use thumb friendly zones, right? Ideally, the more interactive buttons and uh, areas that you need to interact with should be placed towards the bottom of the screen, right? So like I said, when you're holding the screen, there's a certain level you can reach, right? So ideally, all the interactions, place it in that area, right? Try to limit the number of primary actions that are there in a screen. So that Yahoo website example I took, Yahoo was a little bit problematic at that point because there were so many things going on. It was like a super app kind of thing, and it was hard to understand what's going on, right? So limiting the number of primary actions will give the users a clear indication of what needs to be done. So like a screen will be there for a specific task. It's not going to be 10 tasks available in one screen, right? So uh, keep all the interactive buttons and all in a reachable place, and yeah, have the thumb friendly zones covered properly. And another thing is hidden menus, right? So hamburger menus and things like that are good to have, right? But uh, depending on the situation, you need to set it up, right? So if you're having something like a hamburger menu, have it in a way that it's prominently visible to be able to get it accessible, right? So if you can use like bottom navigations for mobile applications, that's the best approach that's there. Even like sliding menus might not be the best approach, but depending on your situation, you will have to decide what you're going to work with. But for mobile applications, the best approach is having a bottom navigation uh, for the navigation purposes, right? So in terms of readability and the visual hierarchy, have proper font sizes, right? So have like a minimum font size of 16 pixels fonts for the body text, right? Otherwise, the font sizes are going to be too small. And like I said, if it's too small to see on a mobile phone screen, your users won't be able to see what's going on, right? Specifically, if it's someone who's older or like has certain visual impairments, if it's like very small fonts, it's going to be difficult to see, right? So ideally, have a somewhat large font. I'm not saying go with massive fonts that are like very big. Have a decent size, which would be consistent throughout, right? And like we discussed earlier, have a clear contrast, uh, and try to identify it using the contrast checkers that I mentioned, right? Have white spaces properly, and separate the sections properly Otherwise, especially in mobile applications, it's going to be very difficult to use. Right. So in addition to that, limit the number of fonts and colors that are there. So specifically when it comes to developing mobile applications, this needs to be followed. Right. Websites, it's a different story. Websites, you might have more colors, but when it comes to mobile applications, make sure that you have a limited number that goes along with the brand. Right. So one of the most important things is giving proper feedback. Right. So every action that you do should have some kind of feedback that's going to come through. Right. Whether it's a loading screen, if you're waiting for something to load, have loading animations to indicate that it's loading. Right. If you tap, give something like a success message. Right. Or if it's like an animation, or if it's like a navigation, you will go somewhere. Right. When you complete a certain task, for example, if you're submitting a form or something like that, make sure that you give the success messages, or if something fails, give a proper message. So when it comes to development, a common mistake that's done is showing the HTTP status codes. Right. So if an item is not found, the error message might be shown as 404 not found. Right. So try to avoid putting messages like that as well. So decide that at the design stage itself. Right. And in your UI UX, identify what are uh, the messages that you're going to show for errors specifically. And so you're not going to be showing HTTP status codes and like codes or anything like that. What you need to do is show the proper messages that are there itself. Okay. Right. So use skeleton screens or progress indicators. Now, again, that's in terms of feedback for progress. For example, now let's say you're filling a form. Now, I've filled forms for these applications that I've seen through advertisements. It asks around 30 questions, right? So sometimes it doesn't indicate how many questions are there, right? Like 3 minutes down the line, people might get bored if there's no indication of how much needs to be filled, right? So there might be 30 questions. That person might give up at question number 25, right? Because there's no indicator as to how much is there. But if there's like a progress indicator telling how much has been used, that will give the users a better proper impression of where they stand. Right. So yeah, avoid blocking overlays or unresponsive transactions. Right. So when you're having overlays and things like that, like be careful when you're blocking text or anything like that behind. Right. And especially when it comes to animations and things like that, make sure they're properly responsive and that they work as expected.
මගේ ෆෝන් එක බැටරි බහලා ගත්තා.
Right. I think someone is unmuted. So anyways, I'll continue. So in terms of accessibility, now when it comes to mobile designs, one of the more important aspects is supporting dark mode, right? Because most people nowadays will prefer using dark mode or light mode. Personally, I'm also a fan of dark mode. And when you're developing your applications, supporting dark mode would make the user experience much better. Right. And have the screen reader capabilities. Like I said, for people with visual impairments who are using applications, they will be running through screen readers, right? So in your applications itself, have those capabilities set up. No, this is more towards the development aspect, right? Rather than the design aspect. Make sure that you have the screen reader capabilities and all that, right? And when it comes to designing your palette, make sure you do a colorblind friendly palette, right? So these are colors that you can search up on Google and get, for example, red green color blindness and red blue color blindness. And there are certain colors that you need to be careful with, right? So do your research properly. If your audience, so like there's a high probability that your user base might have colorblind users. So be careful when you're setting the colors for that, right? So another thing is, now I mentioned having colors for meanings, right? But always you don't need to rely on that too much, right? So work with your branding mainly, right? If you work with colors for meaning, sometimes you might not be able to get exactly what you want, right? So plan those things properly and come up with your palette. Right. So now when it comes to 2025 UI UX best practices, interactions and different motions that are an important aspect, right? Right. So like with development frameworks like Flutter, you can come up with like a lot of animations and you can set it up in certain ways, right? So when it comes to these animations, have a proper purpose for those animations and uh, like feedback or it in a way that too distracting. And if a certain animation takes too long, your users might have to wait for a long time and they might get bored, right? So similar to the loading issue, if the animations are too long, there can be issues that might come, right? So when it comes to mobile applications, avoid having too much parallax effects, right? So parallax effects are scrolling those when it comes to mobile designs. So let me show you a parallax design that's there. Right. So now what I've got here is the iPhone website, the Apple website. So like the Apple website is actually an example for very good UIs, right? So when scrolling through this, I noticed a certain area where there were a lot of parallax effects. Okay, I think it was not this page. So parallax effects essentially like it's like this animation over here, right? When you're scrolling, it scrolls with that, right? So I'll come back to the iPhone website for that explanation. So we'll go back to the slide deck. Right. Meanwhile, if you have questions, feel free to ask as right. Yeah. Uh, like when it comes to micro interactions, such as like button presses, success check marks, and those, you can have certain animations that are there and have it in a meaningful way, essentially, right? So even for micro interactions, like having these micro interactions overall will make the user experience better, right? So like even for a button press, if you have some kind of small animation, for if it's a success check mark, have like animated success check mark, that would make the overall experience of your users much better, right? Okay, so now when it comes to UI UX in mobile, there are certain common mistakes that are done, right? So tiny tap targets is one of these, right? So like if the button that a user is supposed to click, especially on mobile, is too small, it's going to be very, very difficult for the users to press those buttons, right? So make sure if a user is supposed to tap something that it's big enough for the user to tap it, right? Otherwise, users might end up pressing wrong buttons and uh, unexpected interactions might happen instead of what they actually want to do, right? So like having too many buttons cluttered together like can cause issues like that. Okay, and hiddenness, right? So for example, when it comes to a button, if you have like something like a long press, on the long press it does a different action than the normal tap, right? That's an example for a hidden action, right? So being like a user manual, it's going to be difficult for users to understand that there's an action like this. Okay, so avoid having things like that because those are not easy to understand the moment you see it, right? So that's those two very common mistakes that are there in like a lot of applications. So when you design your applications, make sure you don't have tiny tap targets or hidden actions. Another very big problem is not having feedback on interactions, right? So that example I took with the is one. It was giving a certain feedback, but it was giving the wrong feedback, right? So that's also a problem. So when you're giving a feedback, it needs to be the correct feedback that's there, right? So in that game, ideally it should have said equip these items to be able to play this mode, right? But instead, all it was doing was showing this loading screen, in which case I thought it wasn't loading, right? Actually, what was happening was it wasn't going in because that precondition had not been met. Okay, so make the feedbacks meaningful for all the interactions that are there. Okay, another thing to avoid is having text heavy screens, right? If you have too much information going on in a certain application, again, that's going to be a problem because your users won't know what's the requirement in that place. Okay, so that bad UX example I showed is also an example for that, having too much text, right? So the Duolingo page I thought didn't have enough text. That's also a problem that can be there. So little text is fine if the message gets conveyed, but sometimes you need to have that perfect balance to right? And ignoring the loading state is another problem that's there. So like even if it's a loading progress bar or something like that's there, the loading animation itself. So if it's something that takes time, the loading animation itself might not be enough, right? You might have to give like a time indicator or percentage indicator. So like if you're not sure of how long something will take, you can do something like a percentage indicator, right? So having proper interactions for those will make things easier. Okay. Right. So now in 2025, we have like a lot of AI coming in, and there's like a whole different aspect to UI designs and things like that. Right. So you need to follow future ready UX trends to make sure you're up to date. Right. So AI powered personalizations might be there. Right. So there might be voice and gesture interfaces that are available, right? So there's these immersive layouts that are coming in, and a lot goes through, like, even when it comes to searchers, even the basic search has changed now. So I'm pretty sure like most of you all use ChatGPT to get information instead of doing a Google search nowadays, right? So Google is still a very powerful tool, but ChatGPT makes things easier, right? So even when it comes to website designs, it's moving towards something like that going forward. Now there's this new thing called GEO, similar to SEO. So like SEO was all about uh, what's this indexing things on the Google search engine. GEO is all about getting caught by the tools like ChatGPT, right? Getting indexed by those. So for agents, AI agents to work, right? So when it comes to development, those areas you can, but under the UI user experience, setting those things can also be good, right? So make sure your UIs are inclusive and have proper accessibility, like we discussed earlier. And another very important fact is follow minimalism as much as possible, right? Nowadays, having a simple design is what's most important, right? So yeah, those are about the future ready trends. So considering some of the 2025 UI trends that are there, so 2025 has seen this year has given more vibrant and expressive colors that are there, right? There's this thing called interactive 3D elements, right? That's also a very popular thing. So like the Apple website demonstrates most of these new UI trends, right? So that's one of the reasons I'm going to be I brought the Apple website as an example, because they bring in most of the uh, 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 like they create most of the UI trends that are there, right? So dark mode and low light interfaces are very popular nowadays. So specifically, if you're designing an app, uh, you can go ahead with the dark mode by default that's there. So like instead of having light websites, you can go for dark mode straight away. Right, so inclusive and accessible designs, the AI-powered personalization, glass morphism. Now that's a UI trend of 2025. Specifically, I think because of what Apple did with iOS 26. So iOS 26 uses glass morphism. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of it, but the liquid glass design has pushed a lot of other UIs also towards glass morphism, right? And soft UIs is another popular thing. So there's this thing called neomorphism, right? So I have an example for that. I'll show you next. So neomorphism is essentially like very soft looking UIs. Like when you look at that UI, you feel like you get this feeling if you touch it, it's going to be a very smooth surface, like a marble surface kind of thing, right? So that's also one of the popular things. So like neomorphism has actually been pretty popular since like 2020. Uh, so yeah, the Google app actually used neomorphism for quite a while. I think they finally took it off this year. But the soft UIs is another thing that's been popular. Then having micro interactions, scroll triggered animations. Now, a lot of websites have scroll triggered animations, right? That's essentially when you're scrolling, it does some kind of animation. So again, the Apple website has that. Minimalist and clean layouts. That's very popular. Keeping things simple, and voice and gesture based interfaces as well. So like going forward, you might actually come across uh, a lot of applications which will through voice, right? So like even when it comes to someone who's driving, they can interact that through the application using voice, right? So those are things that you can include when you're coming up with UIs, right? So just to show these UI trends, I'll just share the screen with the examples that I have brought. So yeah, let's see this window. This is the Apple website. Okay, so this is a website which I found which uses glassmorphism, right? So glassmorphism and dark mode by default. So you can see like when you're hovering over these items also, it gives this glass effect, right? Everything looks like a glass, like micro interactions are there, like when you click on things and yeah, now that was an animation that was triggered on scroll, right? When scrolling, it lit up, right? So over here also, the animations are coming up as I scroll, and like most of these items are appearing while I'm scrolling, right? So like these are trends of 2025, right? So like even this section, like it gets triggered based on the scroll, and so I'll show that again. Like it's when it gets highlighted that the animation gets triggered, right? So yeah, that's an example for like a lot of UI trends that are there, right? And I'll move on to my favorite example, which is the Apple website, right? So this is the iPhone 17 Pro page, right? So when you're scrolling, now you can see this breaks into pages, like I mentioned earlier, right? So having those page breaks is a very important aspect when it comes to UI UX. Even in mobile mode, it's going to be the same, right? You need to come up with similar designs. Now this one, now 3D interactive objects is also another thing, right? So in the Apple website, you can just mess with the iPhone over here. It's a 3D interactive object that's there. So you can move it around and get an idea of how all the elements are there, right? So this actually has the exact time of, no, that's another time. Never mind. Right. So it allows interaction. So a lot of new websites follow this kind of design, and that's also been a trend, right? So when you're coming up with designs, you can use interactions like that, right? So now there, I believe there was another scroll triggered design. Now there's another one. There's more of a parallax design as well. You can see it sticks when scrolling, and based on me scrolling, it had an animation where the phone zooms out, right? So you can see consistently it breaks into pages, right? For all the important points, it breaks into pages and highlights the content that's mainly required, right? So these are specific interactions that are there following most of the most common UI trends of 2025, right? So yeah, let me get back to the slide deck. Right. So basically, those are some of the trends that are there. And now here are some examples for what's there. So on the left, neumorphism looks like the soft UI designs. And this one over here is glassmorphism, dark mode by default. And of course, Apple's liquid glass UI that's That's been a trend of this year, right? So those are some of the UI trends that are there. And when you're coming up with the designs, these are things that you can follow to come up with your designs, right? So yeah, that basically concludes what I have to say. So I saw a few questions that had been there posted. So feel free to ask any other questions. So give me just a few seconds and we'll get to the Q&A. So feel free to drop any questions that are there and I'll be happy to answer those. Right. So let me try to answer the questions that were there. If you can do a simple mobile app prototype using AI tools, what are your company current users? What are the difficulties you faced in finding the resources for case of mobile app development? How to select fonts size as a standard? Right. So that's a very descriptive question that was asked towards the start. So using AI tools for prototyping. So my company, of course, we don't really use much AI tools when it comes to prototyping, but of course, like image generation and things like that, we use Gemini and there's this Leonardo.ai. So things like that we use for image generation, and mostly for UI UX, what we use is Figma. Right. So both that InfoWebs and Articom, we use Figma for UI generation, UI design rather, and yeah, difficulties when finding resources. So depending on this example animations. So generally, like we come up with mostly custom designs that are there in terms of animations and things like that. Of course, I don't think we've come across any issues like that. I might not be understanding the question properly there. Right. As for selecting font sizes, generally there are some standard font sizes that you can use. Especially specifically 16 pixels, 24 pixels, like there are standard font sizes. So you can identify those font sizes and work with them, and you can set up a hierarchy of how you plan your fonts. Right. For headings you can have certain font sizes, and for body text have like a standard size. So ideally, like if you can see properly on a mobile device, that would be the ideal scenario. And of course, when it comes to UI designs, test it on multiple devices. That's going to be a very important point, right? I think that answers the question. So okay, you've asked for real world experiences as well, right? So there was once a situation where the client was requesting a very old looking UI, right? So in that instance, what we did was we spoke to the client and explained how the UI can be improved, and convinced how a modern looking UI would be more beneficial than something that looked like it was from the 1990s, right? So following UX trends and following uh, the modern UI patterns is a good solution for that. So if you want to get inspired for modern UIs and all, there's this site called Behance, right? So most UI designers actually maintain a portfolio on Behance. So with that, you can actually get some examples of what UIs should look like. Right. Another one is there. Do we have to create a new UI design for the dark theme, or is there another easier way? So essentially, when it comes to dark theme, you can come up with a palette, right? So light theme and dark theme work with the same colors. For example, if you're working with a blue, like use a similar blue tone in your dark mode as well, right? So dark mode will essentially have these dark dark blacks and gray colors. So if you're working with like a blue theme in your light mode, maybe you can make it a little bit towards blues, but essentially try to work with work with similar colors as much as possible, right? But the darker versions of those, obviously. So like let's say you use like a dark blue for your fonts in the light mode. For dark mode, maybe you can have like the black background, white text, and maybe like a light blue text that would be similar. Right. So work with would be a similar transition. Right. If you're working with blues, work with blues. If you're working with reds, stick to reds for dark mode as well. Like light mode will have more of the blue, but dark mode will have just a little bit of blue, indicating that the application is going with the dark blue mode. Right. So that's the best way to go with it. When it comes to development, of course, you can set variable colors, right? Even in Figma, you can actually set variable colors, right? So that will make life much easier when switching also. Okay, so you can set the colors as variables, and you just need to change the variables. It will change all the areas that are there. Is Asia RP11 easy to use? I'm not exactly sure what that is. So I can't really give an answer on that. Okay, dark mode question was there again. Can you suggest some AI tools to create or help in creating a whole application? Also, you mentioned that colors should be common for colorblind users. What does that mean? Using text in white, black case, a good choice. Right. So for AI tools for creating design, now Figma actually has this thing called Figma Make. Right. So that's a AI tool that you can use for creating UI designs. That's actually pretty good. Like insanely good. That gives code as well. But like when you're learning, not the best to use that. But like for creating instant prototypes and things like that, that would be good. But like if you're using it in a competition or something like that, I won't advise going for Figma Make. Like work with the custom designs as much as possible. Use AI just for inspiration. Right. Another one is Google has this thing called Stitch. So Stitch is also pretty good. Figma Make was better than that though. So Stitch is also something you can experiment with. That can also be used for inspiration, but like the UIs are very minimalistic in that. Right. As accessibility doesn't mean that you're supposed to work with just black and white. So there are certain colors that you'd want to avoid for certain interactions, right? So that's essentially all that means there, right? So you can work with colors, definitely work with colors. Otherwise, your applications are going to look boring, right? Like there are these specific colors that you need to be careful with, especially like blues and reds, right? So those are the things that you need to be careful with. Can you spell the website again? Wait, let me put that in the chat. Behance. It's behance.net. right? So I'll put that on the chat. Everyone in the meeting. Behance.net, that's the website. That's that you can get inspiration from, right? So like different UIs are there. So like I'll just share the screen and show you. So like this is the website. So this is actually a platform for like designers in general. It's networking, right? So like you can find designs here and you can get inspired by those. Yeah, so these are like examples for UIs that are there. What can we use to create a t-shirt design? We can use Figma to or any other design software. So like my team of course uses Figma for pretty much everything, right? Presentations, designing flyers, like most of the posts that go on the Articom Instagram page are actually made on Figma, right? Even for t-shirt designs you can actually work with Figma. Even Canva is a pretty good tool for posts and other things. So t-shirt designs, personally, I think Photoshop is the best option. But there are like AI tools as well that you can use. So like you can experiment with those and see. Okay, so now has to stop. Okay, I think that's just one more question that's there. Right. Brief explanation about dark patterns, avoid, mitigate, or utilize, use exhausting from finding or doing certain actions inside the application. As an example, some popular social media use some patterns. Deleting an account is very difficult. The activation is very long, less accessible, then user bounce back. Right. So when it comes to certain actions, you need to like there are these things called destructive actions, right? For example, deleting certain things. So like when it comes to deleting and things like that, you definitely need to have a feedback and a confirmation box, right? If you just delete by just pressing an item, that's going to be a bit of a problem, right? So always get confirmations before deleting, especially when it comes to destructive actions, right? So like GitHub and all, like if you even if you want to like change something from public to private, they ask for certain validations, right? So you can use things like that to make sure you get a proper validation and that the user actually understands what they're doing, right? So that kind of thing, doing that kind of thing would be better to enhance the user experience, because if a user does a destructive action without understanding what they're doing, that might be irreversible, right? So in instances like that, make sure you have a proper user experience to make sure that destructive actions won't go through without the users knowing, right? So like depending on those situations, set it up, right? So yeah, those are all the questions that I have received. Most of them came as direct messages, right? So yeah, if there aren't any other questions, that basically concludes the session that I have planned for you all. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me through social media on either Instagram or LinkedIn. Generally, I'm active in those platforms. Facebook isn't a very good option because I don't really use Facebook. But those two, feel free to reach out. Right. So yeah, that basically concludes my presentation.
Yes, sir. So thank you so much, sir, for that amazing and insightful session. Thank you so much for answering those questions as well, because that really means a lot for us. So yeah, guys, so the Google form link has been shared in the chat as well. Please make sure to fill it out before the session concludes to receive your e-certificates. Yes, so before we wrap up, on behalf of the organizing team, I'd like to extend our heartfelt thanks to Mr. Kushan Bharati for joining us today and sharing such valuable knowledge and experience. We truly appreciate your time and effort, sir. We truly mean it. Yeah, so, and also a big thanks as well to our sponsors and partners for their support. Our knowledge partner, Articum, official banner partner, Shanti Travels, and official digital media partner, Hackasser. Yeah, so, and finally, to all our participants, thank you for joining us today and for your enthusiasm throughout the session. So, before you head off, don't forget to scan the QR code on the slide to join our WhatsApp group and stay updated about future workshops and event details. And finally, a huge shout out to our organizing team for their effort and the dedication in making this event a success. So that's all from us tonight. And thank you once again for being a part of Algoarena Workshop too. So have a great evening, guys.